This show does not provide medical advice. If you're having a medical emergency, please call 911. Anything you hear here should be discussed with your primary health care provider. Hello and welcome to Everyone Dies, the radio show produced by Passionate World Talk Radio, whose goal it is to educate, enlighten, and entertain. I'm Marianne Matzo, and for the next 30 minutes, I am your host. Today we're going to be talking about a disease. I don't know if a lot of people know of the disease or know what it's called, but we're going to be talking about a disease called Huntington's disease. And Huntington's is pretty rare. Statistics are there's about 200,000 cases per year in the United States. So this rare inherited disease causes a progressive breakdown or degeneration of nerve cells in the brain. Because it's happening in the brain, there are huge changes to the person, both in how they're able to function, take care of themselves, movement, thinking, and psychiatric disorders. Now, this is an inherited gene defect, and it's what's called an autosomal dominant disorder. There is no cure for this disease. What they can do is manage the symptoms as it goes along, but there isn't a cure. The numbers are kind of varied. About from diagnosis to death is about 10 to 30 years. Some people say 15 to 20 years. But people tend to be diagnosed younger. It can be actually anywhere between 6 and 80 years old that you can be diagnosed with this disease. Now, childhood Huntington's is a whole kind of different disease outside of what we're talking about today, because today we're talking with Michael. And Michael's wife has Huntington's disease. Her name is Janet. And she was diagnosed 12 years ago at the age of 58. She has two siblings, and both of them have Huntington's. And Michael is now caring for Janet full-time with hospice support. She's been on hospice for about a couple of months. So, Michael, welcome to Everyone Dies.
Thank you.
So, I guess what would be maybe interesting to our leaders is if you would mind talking about Janet's kind of lead up in diagnosis to Huntington's, because it's really kind of hard to exactly put your finger on that this is Huntington's. Now, if you know it's been in your family forever and that could be a possibility, it might kind of say, oh, maybe we should look at that. But if you don't, you might not stop to think, oh, maybe that's what this is. So she was diagnosed pretty late kind of in life for Huntington's. Can you tell me about how that was discovered and how that was determined?
Well, Janet was diagnosed as a result of the physical symptoms. Her feet were twitching, her hands and arms were twitching. I tell people one of the big disappointments in my life was I'd be lying in bed next to her and I thought she was getting frisky, and she was just sick. But they tested her. They thought it was restless leg syndrome, then they thought it was this, then they thought it was that, then it was something else. And finally, we went to a doctor, and she was explaining all the symptoms she was seeing, and he said, no, there's something more involved here. You need to see a neurologist. So we went to see a neurologist, and this was in Washington, PA. Mm-hmm. And I always like to give a shout out to Dr. Brian Katugna in Washington, PA. He was like a bulldog in a white, lab coat. He looked at her and he says, "There's something going on, neurological." He says, "I will figure out what it is." Wow. And she was tested for absolutely everything under the sun. And finally, we went in for a meeting, and he says, "Look," he says, "there's one disease we can still test for." called Huntington's disease, and it's bad. And he gave us just a little bit of an intro to it. And he says it's hereditary, it's degenerative, there is no treatment. But he says go home, read up on it, get online, read up about it, and then come back and tell me whether or not you want to test for it.
And so was he going to do genetic testing? Is that what he was thinking?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, yeah. Now, unlike some other neurological diseases like Huntington's and Parkinson's, actually, there is a definitive test for Huntington's.
Oh, okay.
And so we went home, we looked it up, and we decided, well, whatever it is, we need to know. Mm-hmm. And so we went back, and she was tested and came back positive that yes, she does have Huntington's. But back before the physical symptoms started, back as long as Janet and I have known each other, and in fact as long as our children have been alive, we realized that there has never been a time when they did not know their mother when she was not experiencing symptoms from Huntington's.
Really?
Shortness of but then it showed up prior to the onset of the physical symptoms. It was emotional, mostly emotional, a few cognitive things. Emotional in terms of she, very short flashes of temper, where she would get angry and would just blow up, and 2 minutes later it would be all gone. Just like a firecracker going off. And then there's a symptom called perseveration, which is it's like where your mind gets stuck on an idea and you just going back to it over and over and over and over again. And that was very prominent in our relationship, earlier relationship, and in the kids growing up. In fact, when the first conversation I had with my son about Huntington's, I was telling him about the symptoms that she was experiencing and that I was noticing, and his reaction was, well, yeah, Dad, but Ma's always been that way.
Wow.
And so it was just, one of the advantages, if you can call it advantages, I mean, when Janet got her diagnosis for the disease, it gave people a new perspective on her father, because her father was probably the one she inherited it from, and
really?
people just universally assumed that her father was a ass. He was a jerk, and that everybody just assumed that's who he was. And then when Janet got her diagnosis and they started looking at what the symptoms was, well, maybe he was sick after all. Maybe he was sick too.
Now, was Janet an only child?
No, she's got 2 siblings.
So anybody? Oh, yeah, you told me both of the kids, both of her siblings did have this.
Yes.
Do have this disease.
Yes. Yeah. And so and that's the thing about it. I mean, you have if you inherit it from one of your parents, and you have a 50-50 shot of inheriting it. And it was, most times people know about it because they're musicians, basically, or they have somebody in their family with it. I say musicians because Woody Guthrie died of Huntington's disease.
Really?
And it's a terrible condition. And his wife, Marjorie, basically established what is today the HDSA, Huntington's Disease Society of America. And she founded it, pushed for it, funded it, and it's a wonderful organization in the United States here. But the thing about Huntington's is that even if it has a lot of diseases or a lot of symptoms rather, in common with other conditions. For instance, dementia is a major issue. and which it obviously holds in common with things like Alzheimer's and Lewy body and those sorts of things. And then you have the uncontrolled body movements, which it has sort of in common with Parkinson's. Parkinsonian movement is different, though. It tends to be more like tremors, fine motor control, issues. Whereas Huntington tends to be large, more gross motor movements, like uncontrolled shrugging, or your whole arm or your whole leg flopping around. I've seen folks with advanced stages of Huntington's in special wheelchairs that they literally had to be strapped into. Otherwise, the convulsions would basically thrown them out of the chair.
Now, did Janet progress to that that movement beyond just her hands and her feet?
Not really. I mean, it grossly affected her balance, her sense of balance. She also had, at one point, was constantly biting her tongue, or biting the inside of her mouth, which is, again, very common with HD. Her symptoms were primarily not physical, though. Her primary symptoms was emotional and cognitive. There were what I refer to as there was her violent period, where she would get angry, and I got punched, I got scratched, I got cut, I got bit, and there were times when basically I would just grab her, hold her like a bear hug until she calmed down, because to protect, keep her from injuring herself or somebody else. Thankfully that period passed. But then there's other emotional stuff, like you're dealing with, and by the way, I guess this is common with dementia patients in general. But she would get in my face and she would just yell, how much she hated me, and what a mistake it was that she married me, and these sorts of things. And
that must have been, even though it's the disease talking, it still must hurt your heart to hear that.
Oh yeah, and it's such a common thing. Yeah, I got I'm constantly seeing notes on the support forums, and for Huntington's as well as Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and Lewy body, vascular dementia, and just dementia forums, and where people saying, how do you deal with it? And I said that it's really, really hard, but it requires a carefully cultivated lack of emotional connection. And the way I explain it is, you have whatever your old relationship was, say a spouse, all right, and where the one you're caring for is your husband, and so your relationship has always been wife, okay. But now, because of the disease, you have another relationship that is coming to the fore, which is caregiver. And the problem is that sometimes the wife relationship can get in the way of the caregiver relationship doing what it needs to do.
Right.
And so and I said, I know it's incredibly hard to do, but you need to figure out how to sort of take that role, that wife role, put it in a box and put it up on a shelf for a while, so you can concentrate on being caregiver, because you can't do both at the same time, because one will get in the way of the other. And
so, Michael, do you think that you ever then get to take the box of being a spouse down again?
Oh yeah. I was reading a book about a woman whose husband was suffering from Alzheimer's, and the way she dealt with it is she took her wedding ring off, literally put it in a box in their bedroom, And then at the end, after he passed away, and she had done everything she could care for him, then she took the box down, put her ring back on, and now she's no longer caregiver. Now she's widow again. Now she's widow.
But what I'm asking
for her that was how she dealt with it. But I mean, on a shorter term basis.
Do you ever get to take the box down and just be Janet's husband?
Yes. Yeah. And it hurts. And you do. And I mean, those are the times when you just sit and you cry your eyes out, remembering. But the important thing is to remember not just the pain and not just the sorrow, but to remember all the good times and to sort of be in that place. In other words, people tend to remember, like, say, their weddings. People remember their weddings, but it's overshadowed by what came later. Okay, and that, you know, the trick is to learn to remember those memories and be in the place of those memories. In other words, be with them on that wedding day. There is no future yet. There is no Huntington's disease yet. There is no Alzheimer's yet. There's none of the family problems that everybody always has yet. All you have is the one other person, and you're in love, and you're getting married, and you're exchanging vows. You know, and learning to be in that moment with them right then.
So can you tell me, and, you know, I don't know if this is too personal, but when, in Janet's current situation, when do you get to take the box of being her husband down?
Oh, in the evenings. When recently I wrote about, she went into a 5-day, well, turned into a 6-day, temporary inpatient hospice. And so my daughter Frances and I, we had 6 days where we didn't have to take care of Mom physically and emotionally too, for that matter. But and so there was a time for that, being able to relive and rethink some of those things and remember. But also for me, and one outlet that I have that a lot of people may not or don't, is that I write. And so a lot of times my writing is an opportunity to take that box down, open it up, and look at all the good stuff in it, and to relate some of those things and to replay some of those things and to remember all the good things, that my wife did, that my wife accomplished. Like, for instance, if you're a woman and you enjoyed playing sports in high school or in college, and you live in the era of Title IX, then you owe Janet a debt of gratitude, because in the 1970s, when Janet was teaching middle school in Massachusetts, she worked for the creation of the Massachusetts state equivalent of Title IX, which then became the model for the federal Title IX law. And my Janet, all 5'4" of her, she coached girls basketball. And it was. I'm
only laughing because it must have been kind of cute, somebody so little.
Oh yes. And it was her idol was always there was a really short guard, Spud something. I forget his last name, but he would always he maneuvered so well and got around. The big men couldn't stop him because he literally would run underneath him. But Janet was always involved in politics, and she's addressed at the state level. She's addressed legislative assemblies and hearings and these sorts of things. back when, before you had computers and the internet and whatnot, she taught ninth grade math. And she would sit every night and she would put together an individualized lesson plan for every one of her students, with no computers, no laptops, no PCs, no internet, nothing.
Jeez Louise, how'd she ever do that?
Oh, it was just, she worked just unbelievable hours, but that's who she is, one last example is the other day we were talking, and she asked me about her neurologist, Dr. First-Dimming. And she said, "How's Dr. First-Dimming doing?" I said, "Fine." She's doing well. I said, "Why?" She said, she isn't feeling bad or anything, is she? I said, "Well, why would she feel bad?" It's just because I'm dying, because she wasn't successful. And I said, it just made me what occurred. Is it? She's they're literally lying on her deathbed, and she's worried about about the emotional state of her doctor.
How incredible! She sounds like an incredible woman.
She was. She is. She still is.
So is she? But, so it sounds like other, because with late stage dementia, you wouldn't have that kind of conversation with somebody. So is she still cognitively intact?
There are big holes. Okay, it's it's like Swiss cheese. It's not like, at least in Janet's experience of it, dementia isn't like this metal gate coming down and you don't remember anything past 4 days ago or something like that. Is that it's like Swiss cheese. There are things she remembers clearly, and there's things that she doesn't remember at all, like family relationships. The other day, she was talking about our two daughters, and we only have one daughter, and I said, our daughters? She says, yeah, Franny and Catherine. Well, Franny is our daughter. Catherine is my daughter from a previous marriage. And it's like she in her mind and in her heart, she has adopted Catherine as her daughter.
Really, really, really sweet.
Yeah, so it's just there like one of the things I've noticed recently is she sort of lost contact with her sense. I don't know how to explain this other than like sense of place. She'll be lying in bed and she'll ask me to come over and help her. I said, what do you need? She says, well, I need help lying down. Well, you are lying down. Oh, I'm lying in the bed? Yes. Why do I feel like I'm standing up? Well, I don't know, but you're not. You're lying down in bed. Oh, okay, thank you. So she loses track of things like that. But
considering she had like the balance problems as part of her symptomology, it kind of makes sense, the particular, place of damage in her brain. That makes sense, right?
Oh, yeah. One of the things you need to understand is that with anything that affects your brain is going to, it's like, modern cars have the black box that's under the hood that controls absolutely everything. And because everything goes to that same box, you can have bizarre symptoms that make absolutely no sense. I had a car one time where if I turned on the right turn signal, the radio would turn off. It made absolutely no sense. And I went in the dealer and said, you're going to think I'm crazy, but every time I put on the turn signal, the radio goes off. He says, the right turn signal, right? I says, yeah. He says, yep. Know what the cause is? That's because everything ran through that box. And there was a known failure mode in that model car, with that particular model of controller. Something would fry on the inside where you turned on the right turn signal, it would cause the radio to go out. And the guy had seen it before. It was a known problem. And so you can have a situation like that in where things that seem to be totally disconnected suddenly have an impact or suddenly matter. There was a young African American man in our local support group that one of the things that Huntington did for him is it totally messed up his body thermostat. I've seen him sitting in a 72-degree conference room in a hospital, just sweating bullets. I mean, just water just coming off him just in rivulets, because he was feeling so overheated, and he was. I mean, the way he was getting by is he would have these ice packs that he would strap to his chest to keep his core body temperature down. Otherwise his body temp would have gone up to like 104, 105, and just stayed there until he died.
Wow.
Then you have the physical symptoms, you have the emotional symptoms. There's a story, you get 12 Huntington's patients in a room, and you'll have 12 completely different sets of symptoms.
Right.
There'll
be some commonalities across some of those people, but it's a whole different story. And sometimes it depends on the day that you'll get a whole different story too.
Oh yeah. And I mean, this is why, when I first started writing, I wrote about Huntington's, and then I started realizing that people who are dealing with Huntington's, people who are dealing with Parkinson's, Lewy body, the results in England is called vascular dementia. What it is in the United States, it's the dementia resulting from like a stroke.
Right.
And but all these people, they're confronting a lot. 99% of the symptoms that they're going to be experiencing are going to be the same. So I started, getting into contact with these other groups on Facebook, and getting tremendous response to folks that are dealing with all these different forms. I mean, one of the things that was amazing to me is the number of different medical conditions that can produce dementia.
Right. Yes.
It's mind-boggling.
Yes, literally right. The other thing too is what we were just talking about, how you cope with that is, you said you put that role of spouse in the box and you put it away when you're being the caretaker. And I used to facilitate an Alzheimer's support group, and one of the ways that the group would conceptualize some of the ugly things that their significant other was saying to them was that they would say, that's the disease talking. That's not, that's not Janet. That's the disease talking. And then that, and it kind of results in the same sort of thing like what you're talking about, in that you separate yourself from them. It's like they're not, because you see a lot of daughters and daughter-in-laws who are caretakers to wives, and when somebody's screaming at you how much they hate you, or like you said, I shouldn't have married you, if you take that as they're really saying that, it breaks your heart. But if you're able to realize the disease is talking, and it's not being very nice right now, you kind of shut that off and, have a key line or something, some way that you respond when your feelings are being hurt. Does Janet realize or remember when she has those kind of outbursts?
Sometimes she has in the past. And a couple months ago, she, as her angry phase was sort of tailing off, one day she was talking to me, and she says, I just want you to know that I really do love you. I know I've said some things in the past, but I do love you. And there can be moments of clarity, and they're priceless when they happen. And like when Janet's dad was dying, Janet and I had gone to visit him with Janet's mom, and we at that point we did not know about Huntington's at all, and we were in his room, and he said, Mina, it's his wife, Mina, why don't you take Janet downstairs and show her the cafeteria in this place? They got a really good cafeteria. And I was like, cafeteria? Really? He said, just go show her. Okay. Not sure what this is about, but okay. So as soon as they're gone, he called me over and he held his hand out and he says, Mike, I just wanted to say I'm sorry. You're a good man. Thank you for marrying Janet. And he shook my hand. And I mean, this is a man who at one point had declared very loudly he wasn't even going to attend our wedding, and had thrown fits about that. But it was just and the thing is that one of the things I've learned is that it's a matter of education. It's a matter of learning what's going on. Like, for instance, at one point when our son, Michael, was little, like 4 or 5, he did something. Grampy got angry, just blew up at him, said something nasty. And Michael just ran off crying because, how could Grampy say that, right?
Right. Yeah.
Well, I went to check on him, and one of his older cousins, who was, there was 2 of them. One was 10, and one was like 12, and 2 of them had him sitting down in one of the back bedrooms and explaining to him the facts of life. Okay, Grampy said something upsetting. Don't worry about it. Sometimes he just gets upset, but you give him a couple minutes and he'll be fine. And that'll be, and they were just explaining, they had no idea about Huntington's or anything else, but they had a sense of, all right, this is what happens. We don't know. Not sure why it happens. Doesn't matter. But give him a couple minutes and he'll be okay. And they did as good a job talking to him as I ever could have.
Right.
But that one of the things I've noticed about Huntington's is that when you get your diagnosis, it's half oh no and half oh yeah. Where suddenly things start making sense.
Yeah.
Why things happen, like Janet's older brother, who has since died of an unrelated heart condition. Everybody thought he was a drunk because he would, and they said, well, he came to his daughter's wedding, intoxicated, and the wedding was at like 9:00 in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
And what it was the chorea. Is a very common symptomology. Is people would have these very broad movements, and they look like they're drunk. And so everybody looked at the way John was moving and the way he was acting, and his speech was slurred, and they said, "Oh, he's snockered. How could what kind of a drunk is he? Going to come to his own daughter's wedding?" But then after Janet got her diagnosis, she talked to his wife, explained the situation to her, and so John went in next neurologist appointment, which, by the way, he was seeing one of the main neurologists at Mass General. Mm-hmm. This was not like some guy at a little country clinic somewhere. This is like one of the foremost neurologists probably in the United States at Mass General, and it hadn't even occurred to him to test John for Huntington's. Because when Jenny said to him, he says, "We need you to test him for this," and he says, "What for?" He says, "Do you realize how rare a disease that is?" And she says, "Yes," and his younger sister just got diagnosed with it. Oh, so yeah, let's maybe we do need to test for that.
Yeah.
So it's Janet's neurologist here at in Houston, Dr. First Deming, She teaches at the McGovern Medical School here in Houston. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And she set up a session where Janet could come, or Janet and I both would come and talk to her second-year medical students about Huntington's.
Perfect.
And just so they could see that, and she allowed herself to be examined, and the neurological tests and all that kinds of stuff that they do, and basically be shown off like a prize guinea pig. And she did that because she's a teacher. Mm-hmm.
And those students will never forget what they learned from her either.
Oh, right. Oh, absolutely. I one thing they were asking me to comment on, and one thing I says, for one thing, for Pete's sakes, don't ever just play the odds. Is that you may have a situation where you have a disease like Huntington's where there are like 30,000 cases in the entire United States. That person sitting in front of you might be one of those 30,000. You don't know. Don't ever just play the odds. Mm-hmm. And it's like the clinic Janet goes to covers the western half of Louisiana and all of southeastern Texas. And the clinic has about 100 or so patients coming to it every month. I mean, that large of an area.
And that's what you have. Well, Michael, this has been such an incredibly fascinating chat, and you're so articulate with what's going on with Janet and even what's going on in your own head, and I really appreciate you letting our listeners hear, about this story. And I think there's so many other parts to the story that maybe we can get you to come back and talk
absolutely.
More.
Yes, absolutely. I would enjoy that.
And I want to let our listeners know that Michael has a blog that he does. It's called Reaching Out in Love. And you can find it, Reaching Out, all one word, REACHINGOUT.LOVE. And go read his blogs. He's as good a writer as he is in terms of telling his story. So, Michael, thank you. And
you're sure welcome.
Thank you to our listeners for spending time with me during our show, Everyone Dies. You can read our blogs and listen to other podcasts at everyonedies.org. That's EVERY, the number 1, dies.org. Thank you to our producer, Jeannie White, and our CEO, Lillian Caldwell. We produce a new show every Wednesday to answer questions related to life-threatening illness, dying, and death. Remember, you can listen to Passionate World Talk Radio on Spreaker and our shows wherever you listen to podcasts. If you have a topic that you'd like to discuss at our show, please email Marianne at everyonedies.org. That's MARIANNE at everyonedies.org. That's EVERY, the number 1, dies.org. I hope that you live your best life every day, and remember, every day is a gift. Thank you for listening.